Chapter 2. Fever. Andrew went out at once. He was eager to begin. This was his first case. It was still raining as he crossed the black, rough ground and made his way to the main street. Darkly as he walked, the dirty town took shape before him. Shops and ugly churches, large and cold, filled the street. The sense of being buried deep in the valley of the mountains made Andrew tremble. There were few people about. Beyond the shops and churches, on both sides of the street, were rows and rows of houses. And at the far end of the town, lighting up the watery sky, were the Dreneffi mine workings. Andrew reached number 7 Glidar Place. He took a deep breath and then knocked at the door. He was admitted at once to the kitchen, where the patient lay in bed. She was a young woman, the wife of a miner named Williams. As Andrew went over to her bed, he suddenly felt a great sense of responsibility. He was alone. He must find out what was wrong with the woman and cure her, with no other doctor to advise him. While the husband waited and watched in the cold, dark room, Andrew examined the woman with great care. He could see that she was ill, very ill. But what was the cause of her illness? Andrew could not discover the answer. He felt very anxious. His first case. He must not make a mistake. He examined the patient a second time, but he still did not know what was wrong with her. At last he turned to her husband and asked, "Did she have a cold?"
"Yes, doctor. 3 or 4 days ago," Williams answered eagerly.
Andrew, trying to appear confident, said cheerfully, "Then I'll soon make her better. Come to the surgery in half an hour. I'll give you a bottle of medicine for her." He quickly left the house and walked back in the rain to the surgery, an old wooden building in Page's garden. He lit the gaslight and walked up and down the room, trying to think of any illness from which the woman might be suffering. He knew that it was not really her cold that had made her ill. She had something far worse wrong with her. Feeling very annoyed with himself for his stupidity, he took some bottles from a shelf and mixed a medicine. He had just finished this and was putting the woman's name and address onto the bottle when the surgery bell rang. Before Andrew could answer this, the door opened, and a short, powerful man of about 30 walked in, followed by a dog. The man, who wore an old suit of clothes and dirty shoes, looked Andrew up and down. At last he spoke. "I saw a light in your window as I was passing by, so I decided to come in and welcome you. I'm Denny, employed by the great Dr. Nichols." Philip Denny lit his pipe, threw the match onto the floor, and walked forward. He picked up the bottle of medicine, smelt it, and then put it down again. "Excellent," he said. "So you've begun the good work already. Medicine every 3 hours, the usual nonsense. When in doubt, give medicine." There was silence in the wooden building. Suddenly, Denny laughed. "Why have you come here?" he asked. By this time, Andrew's temper was rising. He answered angrily, "I want to turn Dreneffi into a famous medical centre." Again, Denny laughed. "Clever, clever, my dear doctor." Then suddenly his manner changed. "Listen, Manson," he said. "There are 1 or 2 things about this place that you ought to know. The medical system at Dreneffi is very bad. There's no hospital, nor anything else that a doctor needs. The place is so unhealthy that people often die of fever. usually through drinking the bad water. Page was a good doctor, but he's a sick man and will never work again. Nichols, my employer, thinks only about making money. And Bramwell, the other doctor in the area, knows nothing. And I drink too much. I think that's all. Come, Hawkins, we'll go. He called the dog and moved heavily towards the door. There he paused, took another look at the bottle of medicine, and then added, I advise you to consider typhoid fever in Glidar Place. The door closed noisily, and Denny and the dog disappeared into the wet darkness. Andrew slept badly that night. Denny's remark had raised another doubt in his mind. Was it typhoid? As he lay in bed through the long night, Andrew asked himself if he knew anything at all about the profession of medicine. Next morning, he ate his breakfast quickly and then went to the surgery. Jenkins was already there, mixing the medicines. There's no need to come here so early, Doctor, he said. I can give the men their medicines and sick notes. It's not necessary for you to see them. Thank you, but I wish to see them, Andrew answered coldly. He paused and then asked quickly, What are you putting into those bottles? Jenkins smiled. Water, Doctor. I colour the water to make it look like medicine. The patients don't know. They think it makes them better. After the morning surgery, Andrew drove with old Thomas to Glidar Place. He called at number 7 and then visited 6 other houses where people were now complaining of headaches and sickness. In each case, Andrew found definite signs of fever. He realised with sudden fear that the fever was already spreading. He decided that he must speak to Dr. Page at once. Dr. Page, what's the best thing to do with cases of typhoid fever? He asked. Page replied with closed eyes. Fever has always been difficult to deal with. I advise you to telephone Griffiths, the area medical officer. He paused. But I'm afraid that he's not very helpful. Andrew ran down to the hall and telephoned Griffiths. Hello? Hello, is that Dr. Griffiths? After a short silence, a man's voice answered, Who wants him? This is Manson of Dreneffi. I work for Dr. Page. I have several cases of typhoid fever. I want Dr. Griffiths to come here immediately. I'm sorry, but Dr. Griffiths is out, on business. When will he be back? Shouted Manson. I don't know. But listen. But the speaker at the other end had gone. Manson swore loudly. Turning round, he saw Annie, the servant, beside him. Dr. Griffiths is never at home at this hour of the day, she told him. He's out enjoying himself. But I think that it was Dr. Griffiths who spoke to me. Annie smiled. Perhaps. When he is at home, he pretends that he's out. I shouldn't waste your time on him. That evening, while attending to his surgery patients, Andrew decided to see Denny. It was he who suggested typhoid, he reminded himself. I hate him, but that doesn't matter. I must go to him at once. Denny showed no surprise when Andrew visited him. Well, have you killed anybody yet? He asked in his rude manner. Andrew reddened. You were right. It is typhoid. I've come to ask your advice. Denny gave a faint smile. Then you'd better come in. Sit down. Have a drink? No, I didn't think that you would. For a few moments he sat in silence, pushing dog Hawkins with his foot. Then he pointed to the table and said, "Look at that." On the table stood a microscope. Andrew looked through this and saw on a glass plate the bacteria that were responsible for the fever. "You have typhoid cases too, then?" Andrew asked with interest. "4, and all in the same area as yours. These bacteria come from the well in Glidar Place." Andrew looked at him in surprise. "The sewer is the cause of the trouble," Denny continued. "There are holes in it, and the dirt flows through these into the well. I've reported the matter to Griffiths several times, but he refuses to do anything." "It's shameful," Andrew almost shouted. He got up and moved towards the door. "Thank you for the information. In future, I shall order all my patients in Glidar Place to boil their water." "It's Griffiths who ought to be boiled," Denny laughed. "We shall probably have to see more of each other before this situation improves. Come and see me any time that you can bear it." Going home by Glidar Place, where he left orders regarding the water, Andrew realised that he did not hate Denny as much as he thought. Denny's behaviour seemed strange to Andrew, and when he arrived home, he decided to look up his qualifications in one of Page's old medical books. He found that Denny, who came of a good family, had been educated at an English university and had qualified with good degrees at one of the best hospitals in London. Denny was, in fact, an excellent doctor. He gave his patients the best possible attention and treated them with great kindness. But he refused to give medicines unless they were necessary. Many doctors did not trouble to find out what was really wrong with their patients, but just gave them useless medicines. This made Denny bitterly critical of medical practice and accounted for his strange behaviour at times.